Hey guys, remember school? The place Betsy DeVos is auctioning for parts? Well, these days, school is different. Not only have apples, bananas, and milk been replaced with Snapple, Pepsi, and Domino's Pizza, but the fossil fuel industry is giving lesson plans to teachers. Yay! It's 2017, and in case you hadn't noticed, plans for the apocalypse are back on. Dakota Access Pipeline? Back on. Keystone XL Pipeline? Back on. The Paris Climate Agreement? Backing out.
We're getting out.
In his nearly 30-minute speech on leaving the Paris Climate Agreement, President Trump managed to not mention the phrases climate change or global warming once. But he did mention the word jobs 18 times, warning what would happen to them if the U.S. did try to stop climate change.
The American family will suffer the consequences in the form of lost jobs. Lost jobs, 2.7 million lost jobs.
Yeah, think of all the lost jobs a commitment to curbing climate change would cause. Lost jobs in evacuation services, sunscreen manufacturing, and gondoliering when Manhattan is just a series of canals. How can Americans be so easily lulled into the idea that jobs are somehow at odds with the survival of the planet? Well, it all begins with education and how kids are or are not being taught about climate change in schools. And what they're learning and how they're learning it is, of course, political. This year, 9 state legislatures have introduced bills on climate education under the guise of academic freedom. The laws encourage teachers to, quote, teach the controversy when it comes to certain subjects like climate change. The controversy being maybe climate change isn't caused by burning huge amounts of fossil fuels, even though 97% of climate scientists know it is. Which is like catching your boyfriend red-handed creeping with the girl next door, but being encouraged to teach Shaggy's side of the story. Now kids, she caught him on the sofa, on the counter, she even caught him on camera, but he says, and I quote, "It wasn't me, so gotta teach the controversy." Who's behind these bills? Well, a lot of them have origins in ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, a bill-creating body whose members include state legislators and energy company bigwigs from ExxonMobil and Koch Industries. By getting behind Teach the Controversy bills, fossil fuel companies can give kids the impression that the jury is still out when it comes to climate change. And you can convince kids of anything. I used to think you could get pregnant from swimming in the gym pool. I just found out that's not true. But beyond suggesting that teachers teach controversy where there is none, the fossil fuel industry is giving teachers lesson plans that deliberately create confusion about the causes of climate change. Take the Heartland Institute. They're a climate denialist organization with strong ties to the Koch Industries, ExxonMobil, and ALEC. Earlier this year, the Heartland Institute sent 25,000 packages to public schools called Why Scientists Disagree About Global Warming. It includes a DVD that exposes students to the denialist theory that the climate has always been changing, and to prove that, it spends way too long wondering how the Vikings of Greenland felt when they were wiped out by changing temperatures.
They must have wondered, what happened to our climate system? I mean, did we do something to cause this? That would be really, really useful to learn from the Vikings example. How do we go about coping with big natural changes in the sun and the Earth climate system?
Yeah, and while we're learning from the Vikings, how did they go about coping with all that rape? And what's with the hats? Actually, I've got a lot of questions for the Vikings. Listen, if you're going to pick an example from history to sow doubt about climate change, maybe don't pick one from a place that's literally disappearing before our very eyes because of climate change. By the way, that expert right there is Willie Soon, whose research has been well documented as being funded by Koch Industries, ExxonMobil, and the American Petroleum Institute. The other brainiac featured on the DVD is his research partner, David Legates, who leaves kids with the final thought that even though the vast majority of climate scientists agree that human activity is causing global warming, never stop searching for the real truth.
If we've closed our mind, if we close the doors, we are now shutting ourselves out from the real truth, which is what science is all about after all.
Oh God, really? These guys are like the O.J. Simpson lawyers of man-made climate change. Forget the mountains of evidence against my client. The real killer is still out there. If the climate is hot, man-made it is not. If the winters are still cold, I'm not sold. If Greenland has icicles, the climate is cyclicals. It's not just creating confusion around climate change, though. Kids are also subject to science lessons directly handed down from the fossil fuel industry itself. In several states, teachers receive free materials that offer a sunny, one-sided picture of the coal and oil industry that help them turn away from less fun lessons like the one on black lung or sea level rise. In Oklahoma, the Center for Public Integrity found that a state agency funded by oil and gas producers called the Oklahoma Energy Resource Board has been crafting and giving teachers pro-oil curriculum, like the book series Petro Pete's Adventures, complete with a lovable cast of characters in Petroville, including Petro Patty and Mrs. Rigwell. In one ebook called The Big Bad Dream, Petro Pete goes through a day without anything made from oil.
Pete runs to the bathroom to brush his teeth and comb his hair for school, but his toothbrush and comb are missing.
The soccer balls, basketballs, and footballs are all missing.
What happened to them? Pete wondered.
That was all a dream. All of my petroleum byproducts are back.
Even my asthma's back. Hip, hip. The OERB also has their own Bill Nye knockoff named Professor Leo, who along with his robot friend Piper teaches kids about things like fracking.
It came from a process known as
hydraulic fracturing,
also known as fracking. Now, let's engage the science.
Theater kids. And Professor Leo pushes the idea that fracking is totally safe and doesn't, say, emit methane, a far stronger greenhouse gas than CO2 and a huge contributor to climate change.
Hydraulic fracturing is a proven, safe, and common approach for producing tight formations.
fracturing fluid is 90% water, 9.5% sand, and 0.5% other additives.
Additives that are totally safe. Here, check it out.
I would not do that if I were you.
Oh, please, Piper. I'll do whatever the frack I want. And while all of this is laughable, the OERB has spent a very serious $40 million on lesson plans to reach K-12 students. 9,000 copies of Petro Pete's Big Bad Dream have been sent to schools and libraries across the state, helping kids believe there's nothing questionable about fossil fuels, fracking, or a classmate who's clearly 45 and still in the second grade. The oil industry isn't the only culprit, though. Big coal is also in schools. The industry-funded American Coal Foundation, set up in 1981, has the sole purpose of getting pro-coal lessons into classrooms. There's coal activity books, coal bingo, a coal word search, even ideas for field trips called Students in a Coal Mine. Okay, kids, it's the year 1872, and there are no child labor laws. So grab your helmets and your pickaxes, and remember, if your canary dies, run! The American Coal Foundation even has an elementary school lesson plan where students learn the wonders of mining by mining the chips in a chocolate chip cookie, which according to the lesson plan reinforces the skills of critical thinking, cooperative learning, and knowing how to accept delicious bribes. Bribes. And sure, you might be thinking, but isn't learning about coal mining and oil drilling, even from a biased, bow-tie-wearing actor, still technically learning science and geology? Well, the problem is sometimes the materials don't even meet state education standards. In Illinois, the coal education program distributed to hundreds of teachers a year was recently condemned in a state report for not being balanced regarding coal's environmental impacts. The report also said that the high school lesson plan met 0 science or engineering standards. 0. Or as the coal education program boasted, the number shaped like a piece of coal. It's kindergarten lobbying. And yeah, even though one study showed a vast majority of teachers know better than to use this sponsored curriculum, the efforts to essentially brainwash kids with glorified PR is distressing. So rather than teaching the controversy over climate change, which isn't controversial, what about teaching the controversy over the forms of energy warming the planet at an alarming pace, like greenhouse gas emissions, cancerous carcinogens, acid rain, contaminated groundwater, earthquakes from fracking, coal companies cutting safety measures, sea levels rising, massive crop failure, dead oceans, erratic weather, and the fact that soon there'll be no more almond milk in my latte? And so, for the sake of academic freedom, here is a free lesson plan for all the teachers and students out there, courtesy of Newsbroke, using Petroville's very own Petro Pete.
Petro Pete's Big Bad Reality Check. It was nighttime in Petroville, Oklahoma, and Petro Pete had just come home from a hard day's work on the oil refinery, where he has spent the last 30 years.
Oh boy, I sure am tired. Why am I always tired?
Pete asked his dog and best friend, Liam. Pete bent down to pet Liam, and as he did, Pete started hacking and coughing, likely because the tar built up in his lungs from years of working with crude oil had left him without the physical strength required for petting.
Oh well, better go brush my teeth,
said Pete. Pete walked over to the bathroom to brush his teeth and wash his face. But when he got there, something was wrong. The faucet was spitting out fire instead of water due to the increased fracking in the town of Petroville.
Aw, man, I guess I'm gonna have to skip brushing this week again,
said Petro Pete. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and noticed that the tumor on his face was getting bigger and bigger, just as cases of deadly skin cancer were getting bigger and bigger due to vast ozone depletion.
Damn, this rash just won't heal. I'll put some more ointment on it.
As he smeared his melanoma with Vaseline, Pete turned to his dog Liam and said,
Did you know that Vaseline is made from petroleum? Isn't that amazing?
Liam just shrugged at Pete. The cruel irony that the cancer was being treated with the very product that created it was lost on Pete, but it was not lost on Liam. And so they both headed off to bed. But for some reason, Pete couldn't sleep. He began to think of all the things he had that were made from petroleum.
There's my comb, my soccer ball, and my oxygen tank.
These days, Pete mostly used his oxygen tank. But just then, the entire room began to shake violently. It was an earthquake caused by the ceaseless fracking in Petroville ever since science teachers stopped teaching the dangers of fracking. Everything started toppling over, his computer and his bookcase, his drawers, and finally, his oxygen tank, which fell right on top of Liam's head and killed him, freeing him from the slow, painful death he would have had from years of drinking polluted tap water. Suddenly, the quake cracked the water pipes, and being that the pipes were filled with fire, set Petro Pete's entire house ablaze.
This is a bad dream. This is a bad dream,
Pete repeated to himself. And as he was being consumed by the flames, Pete realized that, in a way, his body was also a petroleum byproduct, and that his teacher, Mrs. Rigwell, would be proud. And that made him feel good, but not as much as the fire on his skin made him feel bad. The end.
That's a damn good sketch. Yes, that is our animator Marissa's amazing work. Thank you so much for watching Newsbroke again, and subscribe. This is the time to subscribe. And we love you, so talk to us. Let us know what kind of climate education you all received, and was it sufficient? Did you ever mine for a cookie? What kind of education do you think kids today should be receiving? What should they be learning about climate change? Let us know in the comments, and see you next time.